Good morning.
Good morning. Oh, that's Maria. Here we go. You know, you could put a background in on Zoom. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Whatever you want. I did it. Good morning, Ursula.
Good morning.
Did you see that Finola sent us an email?
Yes,
No.
I just forwarded her the link.
Okay.
Is that bad news?
No, she didn't have the link to get into the meeting.
Bad girl.
Yeah, I know.
We're doing the treasurer's report first, right? So that I can do that
Yes.
and then I have to go. Okay.
I mean-
I sent it on the forum to everybody since I couldn't do it any other way. And on the forum, you can actually give an attachment. So I attached it as an Excel and as a PDF.
Okay.
And I updated it to today because we have like another 4 contest entries and a little more money. So we're in very good financial shape. Good morning, Barbara.
I'm a bit early. Should I step out and come back?
No.
Oh, okay.
We're going to start soon.
Okay, I thought maybe it was
time.
some sort of executive meeting or something. I'm always aware of that type of thing. Good morning, ladies.
I sent out the treasurer's report, Barbara. I don't know if you got it. I sent it through the forum as an attachment.
Oh, okay. I'll have to look for it then. I'll look for it. Yeah. Well, happy birthday, Ursula.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Oh,
today
yes.
is the day?
No, next Friday. On Friday.
Your birthday? How old are you? 12?
I'm so
Oh,
glad
wait.
I'm not.
Next year on the train. Next year on the train. We should all get on the train. We should all take a train across Canada
Or
to
something.
celebrate Ursula's birthday.
Have you ever done that, taken a long train trip?
That's what I'm actually supposed to be doing.
Yeah, you talked about that last meeting.
Yes.
I think I told you I did that. I really enjoyed it.
Me too. I took the train back from Montreal.
So I hope maybe, probably not next year, but the year after.
I'm doing an RWANYC train trip.
Yeah, I did that trip up to Montreal a number of years ago, from New York City up to Montreal.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful ride.
And then from Montreal to Ottawa, Canada as well. Yeah.
It's a writing trip.
Yes.
Writer's retreat on a train. Hey, there you go.
Yep, that'll work.
That would
Maybe
work.
we can get Amtrak to pay.
Why not?
Even better, Maria.
Hello there.
Why would they pay?
Hey,
This
Michael.
is Teresa.
Teresa's on the phone. Teresa's calling in.
Okay,
So she'll be listening in.
good.
We haven't started yet, Teresa. We're just waiting.
Hi,
That's
Teresa.
okay. Hi there. I have to find out if my phones have enough RAM or memory to do this. My phones are old. They're like 10 years old. So, but I'm trying. I'm trying to get involved again and do things. I haven't been well, but that's par for the course. That's what happens in life. What's the agenda for today?
Our guest speaker is going to be Finola Austin, and she's going to talk about researching historical fiction.
I hate to miss this. Are we recording this by any chance?
I'll try and
Because
I'll remember to ask Maria to hit record.
I'm actually writing historical fiction with somebody right now, and this would be really appropriate. But all my family is here, and so I really can't stay for the whole meeting. I can just do the treasurer's report, and then I have to buzz off.
If everything
Okay.
works out, I'm actually going to see my mother on Friday.
All right. And we are recording, Jean.
Thank you so much.
Hi, Jean.
Hi.
Yeah, Arthur, how are you? Haven't seen you in a
Pretty
while.
Yes. Hey, nice to see you. Yeah, I've
Hey,
been
Arthur.
busy. Sorry.
Good to see you.
Yeah,
Jean, have
by
you
the way,
seen Case? Have you heard from Kay Springsteen recently?
Yes.
Because I've sent her some emails and she hasn't responded. I just was wondering if
Having a
she's
very,
okay.
she's having a very difficult time on a personal level. There's a lot going on.
I
That's
thought
very
it was something because she's a responsible person, and
is, and it's just been really horrendous. And I don't feel comfortable, discussing the details.
I understand.
Since
I
we're
understand. I
personal
thought it
friends,
was
but it's
something.
just been
I thought
bad.
it was something like that. Yeah, because it's not like her not to respond.
No, and I have another friend who sent her edits and hasn't gotten them back, and she just got like the first half back from Kay because she just has not been herself and has not been able to do.
Okay, I'll send
much. She's
her a
been
note.
working, but not.
I'll send her a note.
Jean, did National get back to you and tell you that I had requested to be put in the chapter because I couldn't get into the chapter through the app. I couldn't register into the chapter, and I've never been charged on my credit card for the payment. So I don't know where I am.
I have not heard anything.
Yeah. National is not doing too well, is it?
Actually, Jean, I have to send you some information because you're gonna need to send an invoice to someone so they can join the chapter.
Okay.
This will be the way to do it if someone doesn't have PayPal.
I have PayPal. I have PayPal. I can go through PayPal.
I have to double check. Let me check right now. I think you are part of the chapter. Let me check. Okay, do we want to give it another 5 minutes?
Okay. And all my information is the same, so if you want to get through to me at another time and call me, later, not during the meeting, I'm home.
Okay.
God, am I home. I've been a prisoner since March, and it's driving me a little bit crazy.
Morning.
Okay. Oh, Lord. Miss you guys.
Yes, you too. It's Maria, the other Maria.
I have to tell you, they have to get a resolution for this. We can't go on this way, not meeting with people and not dealing with people. Something's got to give.
I agree. It's a little lonely, because I work from home too. I'm sure a lot of you guys do as well.
Yeah, me too.
I know. Well, the only relatives I have left are all in Spain.
Oh,
Nobody in the United States at all.
yeah.
And I lost one of my relatives to COVID earlier this year.
I'm sorry.
So
Sorry.
it hasn't been a happy time for.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm sorry to hear that. These are folks who lived overseas who died? The relatives who died were all overseas?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness, I'm so
Oh,
sorry
no.
about that.
It's heartbreaking,
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm the only one who, my parents and I stayed in this country, and I stayed in this country because I was born here. And as I tell people, I'm not a Spaniard. I'm an American. I'm a New Yorker, born in Manhattan, educated in Manhattan, worked in Manhattan.
Yeah.
And when I die, I'll be buried in the Bronx.
Oh.
So,
Yeah.
you know.
But your sister lives here.
What?
Your sister. You have two sisters.
They're not sisters. They're sisters of my heart. They're people who I am very, very, very close to, and they're the proxies of my health. Their children are my godchildren. But genetically, I don't have anybody in this country.
Oh, got it. Got it.
And when I die, my grandmother, my paternal grandmother's line becomes extinct.
Oh.
Because my cousins are half cousins, but they don't see that way. They don't see it that way. They just see me as a cousin.
Right.
So,
right.
You know, but my grandfather married twice. My grandmother died at childbirth with my uncle.
Oh.
That's how they discovered I had factor V Leiden. No, that is the tell. If you, on your second pregnancy, die at childbirth, 100% chance that you have factor V Leiden.
Really?
Because if you get pregnant twice, you will die in your second pregnancy.
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
and they discovered this in 2001. It's like a whole big write-up and da.
What is it that you have?
What?
What is it that you have, if that's the case?
Factor V Leiden. I produce an enormous amount of blood clots.
Oh, wow.
In fact, when you draw blood from me, or when I fall and scrape myself or whatever, even though I'm on Pradaxa 150 milligrams twice a day, which is the strongest Pradaxa out there, and it's much stronger than Coumadin, in 2 seconds, you pull a needle out of me and it closes up. You don't need a Band-Aid.
Wow.
One nurse said to me, "This is why we are so scared of you." I said, "Don't worry, don't worry. Take a deep breath, go forward."
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to get ready to start the meeting.
Yay!
Teresa,
I'll
send you a link to join the chapter later. Okay?
Okay, sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just so everybody can know, I'm going to mute everyone except Ursula. And then when Finola gets on and it's her time, we'll, unmute her as well. If anybody has questions, please use the chat. And in the chat, I also put in the link for our August hot blog tour. So we want everyone to join. Okay, so let me mute everyone now. Okay, and Ursula, 1 second. Hang on. Very strange. I can't find you. There you are. All right, Ursula, go.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you to the August 2020 RWANYC meeting. As usual, this is our celebration of hot. This is our hot month. I want to start the meeting with the treasurer's report. Jean?
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. I sent an updated 2020 treasurer's report to everyone this morning via the forum, the loop, whatever. It's attached. Actually, I forgot the attachment on the first one. Didn't realize I could attach something. So the second one has an Excel version and a PDF. Please look it over and get back to me. This is the way we're going to be doing treasurer's reports from now on. We will list the event or the item, what we have brought in the way of money from it, what was expended, and what the difference was, so that we can see if we're making a profit, if we're losing money. It doesn't mean that if we're losing money that we necessarily don't want to continue something if there are other benefits, like the Brooklyn Book Festival never broke even, but it didn't matter because it was also really great promotion for the chapter. So that was a worthwhile expenditure. So it isn't just like we take something out if it's in the red. You have to kind of evaluate, you know, the value of things. So please look it over and get back to me with questions. If you have questions now, that's fine, or you can email me with your questions about anything that's there. I have stitched together from the information I had. I'm not sure that everything is exactly accurate to the penny, but from now on, everything is going through me and through Ursula and through this board. So I will have exact figures and what everything was spent for. And you have a right to know what is happening to your money. And we intend to give you updated reports every month. Questions? Oh, we have about $5,000 in the bank. So we are very flush right now. Doing Zoom meetings, we have saved the rent, and we have informed TRS that we're not doing any on-site meetings there for the rest of the year. So that money is safe with us. We don't have to spend that, and that's very good. And so now we have money to do other things if we want to. So we're in good shape. We also have 21 entries to our contest, which is great. And they're coming in. No questions? Okay.
Okay,
That's it for me, and I have to leave, so.
Jean, enjoy your family, and
Thank
we'll
you.
see you next month.
You bet. Take care, everybody. Keep writing.
Bye-bye.
Okay, next is Michael with the secretary's report.
Okay, we have now 69 members in our group, and that's where we stand. And when it comes time to talk about the Brooklyn Book Festival, as Gina alluded to, I'll talk about that in a few moments as we get, carry on with the meeting here.
Okay, thank you. Maria, programming.
Good morning, everyone. Hang on, let me show my face. Hi. So I'm happy to report that for August 19, we got Rhonda Peters from the Walrose Press. Petters? Rhonda Petters. She is president of the Walrose Press. So we're going to do our 1 hour Q&A with her. So that's going to be very exciting. And then for September, I am looking into doing an agents panel for us, again by Zoom. So that will also be very exciting. And now that I have your attention, I put in the chat the email, a reminder about the August Hot Blog Tour. We're starting August 10th. I already have like 6 people joining, but I would love if everyone takes advantage of it. And all we need is, a sexy scene, it doesn't have to be graphic or anything. It just can be emotional, the first kiss, the first look, the first hand touching, stuff like that. The morning after, we're not picky. So please send it in as soon as you can so that we can get that rolling. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Okay, the contest. I have not had a chance. Thankfully, I'm on vacation this week, so I can catch up on all the work that has been ignored. But we do have a lot of entries. I think Jean said we had 21 entries. I'm not sure. But I am
Yes,
going
21.
Okay, I'm going through the entries. I'm going to be sending everyone confirmation letters. So if you haven't received the confirmation letter yet, please, you will get one. And the contest is open until August 31st. So if you intend to do a submission, you still have a couple of weeks left. Remember, it is the very first chapter of any unpublished romance, and you don't have to be published. This is open for published and unpublished authors. The top prize is $50, and Stephen Zacharias from Kensington will be our final judge. Did I miss anything about the contest?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. So next up is the blog and social media.
Oh, that would be me again. So I already gave you the notes about on the chat to a reminder. Okay, so, right, the Rhonda's presentation will be Wednesday, August 19th, and it will be at 6 o'clock at night, which will give you time to refresh and everything and join the writing sprint at 8. For social media, we continue to do Mondays. You know, we have a very busy week. So Mondays are Meet a Member. Wednesdays are the writing tips. And Fridays are the book cover Fridays. So as I get the Meet a Member forms and people fill those out, you know, I schedule you in. And but other people who can't send me their info, who don't have time to do the member form yet, are sending me like news about their upcoming releases, which is good as well. You know, we will, don't worry, I will not forget you. I will grab you later to get me a Meet a Member form. But this is free publicity for you. So we encourage everyone to take advantage of it. And for the unpublished, don't think that just because you're unpublished, you cannot be, you know, publicized. You still have good writing tips to give us. We still want to meet you, as it were, you know. So we want to know all about you. We want to share, you know, amongst ourselves, all our writing tips and our experiences. And, you know, we are a community. So we need to meet each other, especially now that, you know, we're all homebound. We really need to reach out, and, you know, doing the Meet a Members are really good because that's where it sort of starts. Okay.
Okay, and just to piggyback on that, please, if you have any good news, you won a contest, you got an agent, you published the book, any good news, please send that to me, or you can either send that to info@rwanyc.com, or you can also send that to keynoteseditor@gmail.com, because we want to put this in our newsletter, the e-newsletter that I send out once a month. Plus, go to the forum, and the forum is kind of dead. Go to the forum, shout to the top of the roof, I got acceptance from an editor. I'm going to be publishing my book. The only thing you cannot put on the forum is buy links. So if you say, I'm going to be publishing my book in September, just put a link to your website. We want to hear the good news, because that's one way to help encourage those who are not published or those who have been struggling. And we also want to congratulate you. Let's see. Publicity. The Brooklyn Book Festival.
That would be me. Okay. The board has decided to go with putting up an announcement on the Brooklyn Book Festival. It's not the same, folks, as you may have been accustomed to in the past. No people, no tents in downtown Brooklyn. It's going to be all virtual between September 28th or October 5th, if I recall the dates. Now, Maria Ferrer, forgive me if I was a little bit out of it on Tuesday, had a long day to the office, didn't want to, but you mentioned to me about I think you mentioned in an email, to which unfortunately I erased by accident, about having little blurbs or something like that from various members of the chapter, which is fine. You know, I would need something like that, you know, by a certain date so I can send it to Jerry Allred at the Brooklyn Book Festival. Obviously it's not promotional for ourselves individually, it's just for the chapter. Now, I have other news about the Brooklyn Festival. For those of you who wish to participate in the Brooklyn Book Festival individually, you can do that. It's only $50. I'm gonna hold up a thing in front of my face here. I don't know if you guys can see this. Jerry Allred at brooklynbookfestival.org. You can write to him.
Maybe you can put it in the chat.
I will put that in the chat. I'll put that
Thank
in the chat. And you can write to him and you can promote your book, More Books, that way if you want to promote yourself individually. So you can do that, but not, of course, on the RWA event. And again, I'd like to get that, I'd like Maria to get this materials from you folks within about a couple of weeks so I can send it out to Jerry as quickly as possible.
Well, just so that the members know what we're thinking of. Basically what it is it's sort of like a virtual image, right? So what we were thinking of doing for our virtual image, instead of just doing our logo, which you see here, is we were thinking of doing the logo in the center and then doing like a word bomb. You've seen those, right? So, but instead of a word bomb, we were thinking we do all the members' names. Okay, so we would do our logo in the center and then all around us, like a word bomb, would be everybody's name. Okay, but we would need your permission and stuff. So we're going to send out an email. We're going to have a deadline. So as you know, and then this way you can also tell us, because some people write under different names.
Right.
So you can have one name, two names, you know, you send it to us and we will throw you into this word bomb. So then when they see our ad, as it were, will be our little logo with everyone's name so that everybody can get, you know, a shout out. And then the link will go to our website.
Okay.
So watch for the email, and everybody, it's free, it's extra publicity. You know, even if you get your own table at the Brooklyn Book Festival, you know, you are still a member of RWANYC, and we want to promote you. So, you know, throw your name into the name bomb.
Thank you.
Okay, also Maria had come up with another idea that we could post on our website, and I actually like this idea. We can have maybe one or two quick sentences, interview members, one or two quick sentences that we can compile together into a video and have that posted on our website. If there's anyone who has experience with compiling videos together, please reach out to me today so we can start working on this right away. And I really like the idea. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, if you've ever attended one of the national conferences, usually during the award ceremony, they have a video, and one year at the end, they had people just, different individuals waving goodbye, saying congratulations to everyone, or they may have a question and they have different people answer the question, maybe a few sentences, and it takes about a minute. So, like I said, any experience with videos, please send me an email today so we can start working on this. I really like that idea, Maria.
Yeah, because if we don't find anyone who knows how to splice and edit the videos, what we were thinking of is doing like this, an open Zoom meeting, okay? And then our topic would be, you know, we'd have like 3 questions or something. So we'd have like, what's your favorite, you know, romance troupe, okay? And then, so we say, Candace, what's your favorite romance trope? And then you have 1 minute to say something. And then we move on and we say, Reshma, you know, like, why romance? You know, and then so you'd have, you know, a 1 minute thing. And then we'd move on to Kate, we'd move on to Anne, we move on to Arthur, like that. So everybody would get 1 minute, and, you know, we can send you the question ahead of time. You can pick your question. And so this way we call on you, you give your answer, we move on to the next one. And then we move on to the next one. And so we do our own little video, and it would be good promotion. You know, we'll have it on our website just to have. And then whenever we need something, it can be right there, you know, so we can pass this around, show it at different places. And again, it's free publicity for you, free publicity for our chapter.
Cool.
Okay, are there any concerns that people want to bring up? Okay, so it's now time for our round robin.
Oh, okay, so I will unmute everyone. Hang on.
Okay, when I call on you, just give your name, what you've been writing, any shout outs, and you have I'll give you everyone no more than 2 minutes to do your shout outs. We're gonna start with Maria Ferrer.
So I'm giving my standard answer. You know, I'm always plotting and everything, and I am joining the Wednesdays writing sprints to keep me, you know, honest. And they're lots of fun, so everybody should join. And so I'm just plotting away, and I want instant gratification. So I'm working on short stories instead of my long one.
Candace.
Yes, ma'am. I'm Candace Lucas. I write mostly romantic comedy. I've got one suspense novel that I've written, and I've got another one that I started. I finaled in the Mara contest, I found out a week or so ago.
Wow, congrats.
Nice.
And, but I wasn't in the top 3, but I did final, which, you know, I guess like their final.
That's good.
Category wise. And I finally am trying to be a little bit more proactive about actually doing something about writing. And I'm hiring somebody to help me get my website online. So I'm working on that right now.
Okay, Michael.
Okay, well, as far as my current writing is concerned, it's really reserved for the writing sprint at the moment because I'm busy trying to shop my completed work. So I'm up to 45, a little more than 45K in my present work in progress, and that's where I stand.
Arthur.
Well, you know, I'm new at this, so I'm just writing, and I've got a few things completed and gone out and waiting forever and ever and ever to hear. So we'll see. It's the slowest 19th century phenomena in the world. Still working.
Barbara.
Hi, I'm Barbara, and so I've been having fun with our writers group Monday evenings once per month, and I've been juggling works in progress with the group and getting great feedback, which I've really appreciated. And otherwise, I'm thinking about possible future projects. These characters have been starting to talk to me, so I think I better start listening. But otherwise, that's what I'm up to, just juggling my 2 works in progress.
Rashma.
So lots going on. My first book is I'm going to self-publish this month. I don't have an exact date. I got my website up and running and my newsletter, so whoever wants to register, that would be nice. And then, what else? My book cover is almost done, so maybe I will be reaching out to you with that. So.
Congratulations.
It's great.
And then is Ivy Hunt, so Register. I'll take it.
Alexandra?
Hi, I'm Alexandra, and I'm new at this, but I recently figured out that I have more seedlings than I thought, so I'm still working that out, which ones I like best.
Maria Cox?
Good morning, everyone. Maria Cox, yeah, the other Maria, as we like to say. I am not writing, but I'm back with the group so that I can pick up where I left off. I write sensual romance, and I transitioned over a year ago to writing a personal narrative, and I had been dormant with my personal narrative, so I need to get back into the swing of writing. I am reading, and so I'm happy to be here. So thank you.
Okay, Finola, we will get back to you. Anna Kingsing?
Hi, I write queer paranormal historical fiction, and today I just finished the book 2 of my novel that, is sort of gay tentacle romance.
Congratulations.
So I was a little late this morning because I was finishing the last scene of book 2. So it's just, I finished the first draft, so there's still plenty of work to do on it, but I finished this morning, so.
Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anna DiPaolo? Oh, you're on mute.
Take off your earphones.
You're
Try that.
silent. You're on mute. I don't think
She's not on mute.
Oh, she's not?
No. Take off your earphones. Take off your earphones, Anna. Unplug. Unplug the earphones from the laptop. Now?
Yes.
Can you? No.
We can hear you, I think.
No, that's me. That's Maria.
Oh, that's you.
Okay, so pick somebody else while she's working.
Okay, Kate?
Where's Kate?
Did Kate disappear? She was here.
Yeah, she was.
Who's
Yeah.
here?
Okay.
She probably got bumped off.
Teresa?
I'm here. I have been plotting and thinking and writing, but I have not been well. And it's very hard to concentrate and write when your whole body and your whole everything is in pain. So let's not discuss the bad things. We're going to go forward with the good things. And I'm back. I'm trying to get my act together and take it on the road. And you guys are the road. So here we go.
Yeah.
And
hope you feel better.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm slowly but surely, I have to conquer the stairs. I fell in my bathroom, and I have an old tub, and my legs went under the tub, and I had to get EMS to get me out. And then my legs lost all their strength, and now I have a PT man, and I'm learning. This week, I finally was able to walk down to the first floor and walk back up. It took me about almost an hour, but I did it. So that's step one in the recuperation, and I'm going to do it. It's hard, but you got no choice. You either succeed or you drop dead.
Nobody wants that, of course.
Yeah.
And as a friend of mine said, I'm too ornery to die. I'm way too ornery to die, so I'm back. It's just been very difficult, and I've lost 9 people
Oh,
to
my.
COVID this year, and I'm very depressed. I was very close to the people who died, and I'm very, very depressed. 9 people in 4 continents,
Oh, that's sad.
from
Teresa, you're
Australia
always in
to
our
Europe.
thoughts.
Mhm.
It's hard because everyone's going through so much that I feel bad. Like yesterday, I had a 4-hour fight with the World Trade Center health program, and they're now shaking in their boots because I threatened to get a lawyer and go after them. This has been going on now since October of 2001, and I'm just fed up.
I don't know.
I'm fed up.
Okay, y'all may lose me in a minute because I'm having
Yeah,
problems
let me go.
with Zoom.
Let me go because you got to get going.
Anna, are you able to come back on? Are you able?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Anna DePaula?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
They can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay, okay. Hi.
Hear you.
I don't know why. I just switched headphones and suddenly, presto, things started working again. I'm fine. I am finishing up edits on the Sargaby's book still, and that's basically it. I've just thinking about where things are going next. And anyway, for those of you who don't know me, I've been a longtime member for about 20 years, and but I'm on Long Island now.
Okay.
Kate Dunn?
Hi, everybody. It's good to see your faces.
Okay, Kate's not back. So, I'm not sure if y'all can hear me because
can hear Kate.
My Zoom kind of froze.
Can you all hear me?
So anyway, I'm Ursula Renee, and I write historical fiction.
Sorry about that, Kate.
I write historical fiction with romantic elements, and I'm working on a couple of things, and hopefully I will have good news next month.
Great.
Kate? Okay, I think we've lost Kate.
No, Ursula, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, Kate is on. Kate is on.
Yeah. Can you hear me, Ursula?
Kate Dunn?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
All right.
I was on twice before. I'm having all kinds of Zoom trouble today, so I'm.
No. Okay, so let's hear from Kate. Go ahead, Kate.
In the past 8 months of self-published 2 short stories, which has been really fun, and put out my first newsletter, and been really enjoying working with the critique group, and just working on the second story and what I hope is going to be a series set in a resort in the Adirondacks. So things are going well.
Okay, does anyone hear anything?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to log out of Zoom and I will be right back.
No problem. We'll be here. Okay. So while Ursula goes in and out, again, I want to remind everyone about the Hot August blog tour. So please send us your scene. And also we'll be sending out later today, we'll be sending out the email about putting your name into the publicity for the Brooklyn Book Festival. You know, basically what we're going to do is we're going to do a name bomb with everyone's name. So it could be, you know, your pseudonym or your real name, whichever one you write under. If you write under 2, you know, the more the merrier. And also we will let you know about the video. So if we can't find anyone who can edit for us, we'll just do like this, a big Zoom meeting, and then we'll call on individuals. We'll send everyone, you know, maybe we'll just pick 2 questions or 1 question. And then this way everyone answers the same question for, you know, a minute, and that will be your free publicity. So, and if you just happen to have your book cover or your name really big, like behind you, you know, it's another plug. So we're easy. Michael, anything else you want to say?
No, I think you pretty much put it in a nutshell there, Maria. Just a reminder, I did post on the chat about if you want to participate individually for your own work on the Brooklyn Book Festival, please write to Jerry Allred. So that's it.
Yeah, the tables are $50.
That's correct.
You know, and it's basically, they'll do publicity. I mean, they're not going to do, it's sort of like a publicity for everyone. So what they'll do is they'll have like a running list and whatever. And so your name or the little icon will be in all their publicity things. And then people will go, you know, shopping or strolling or whatever. And then they will hit your, say, photo, and that will throw them into your website, you know? So if you want to buy your own table, you know, it's $50 and it'll throw them back into your website.
And by the way, if I may add, Maria, to that.
Absolutely.
It's, Jerry did mention to me in an email, it's not just for locally here in New York. This is going out nationally and internationally. So your name and your work is going to be shown globally. So it might be well worth your while for a $50 investment. It might be well worth your while to, if you have any works out now, please do so and write to Jerry, and he'll give you all the details.
Ursula, you back?
Yep, I'm here.
All right.
Okay, so Finola Austin is going to be our guest speaker. I want to give everyone 5 minutes to get up, stretch, get more water. So actually a little bit more than 5 minutes. We will start at 10:45 with Finola Austin giving a discussion on researching historical fiction. 5 minutes, everyone, stretch.
Okay. Maria? Hello? Okay, 5 minutes.
I'm here.
Oh, listen, I just wanted to point out something quick that
Sure.
I discovered yesterday. Don't just clear out your spam. Look at your spam every day in your email. I discovered that, like the last one, that D. Davis sent out a notice about something she's writing and blah, blah, blah. They take that and put it automatically into spam.
Oh.
This is in Google. This is Google Mail, you know, gmail.com.
Mm-hmm.
And they've done that with other people. So don't ignore your spam. Go through it, even though it's tedious. I go through it now every day because I forgot to mention it when I was on before. I think it's very important. If we're trying to send something to some people or trying to, they're just, you know, arbitrarily putting things into spam. And their excuse is that the person who's sending it has been known to send out spam. And I'm like, D, sending out spam? What, are they crazy? I mean, I know D. Davis. She doesn't do that. This is something arbitrarily that Gmail is doing.
I had problems with that, and I called the Geek Squad, who I have an annual membership with. And what they did, because I called twice, and the first time the guy futzed around with all kinds of stuff, and it lasted about a week, and then reverted to going to spam. The second guy I called actually went into, because I use Outlook, he went into the actual Gmail on Google site, and he clicked on the providers that I wanted to make sure to receive emails from. He right-clicked on them, and their little thing came up and it said, "This is not spam," and he clicked on it, and that worked. I've been, everything that I wanted to go into my regular, box went in, because he went into the spam folder and he clicked on, like I get emails from Bank of America to let me into my remote access. He went into spam, found a Bank of America email, right-clicked on it. It gave him an option to say, this is not spam. That's what he did, and it's been fine since. So you could try that.
I know, but until you can get someone to go into the Google thing and do it there, we have to be proactive and check our email, even in the spam, because you never know if it's something that someone is sending you.
Well, that's the problem, is that if it's something you weren't expecting and it goes in, yeah, so I've had to regularly check spam, but I had a bunch of things that on a regular basis were going into.
I know, because I get things from Australia, from Barcelona, from Zamora, from Wales. I mean, I get from Ireland. I get things from all over the world. I know people all over the world. And I have to go hunting for them and make sure that they're not in spam.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah, because these are individuals they're doing it to, not organizations.
No, I know. Some of the stuff I was getting were individual as well. They were going into spam. And you're right, I just had to continually check my spam folder.
Yeah. And this is supposed to make life easier for us?
Well, it's hey, listen, having started doing what I do for a living back in 1985, before we even had faxes, believe me, this is an improvement.
1985, I was in NYU learning computer technologies for the mainframe and later for the Hewlett-Packard.
Wow.
That I now have to learn. I now have to learn the phones and I have to learn the laptops. I never did the small stuff before. I did huge mainframes, and it's a totally different thing. I'm at square one. Like I told Maria yesterday, I said, you have to treat me like you're talking to an idiot, because in this area, I am an idiot. I'm learning. I will not bring my other knowledge in, because that will only confuse the world.
We don't use that word here. Idiot is a four-letter word.
What is a four-letter word?
Idiot. We don't use that word.
Yes, ma'am. I don't argue with the boss lady.
So Ursula, I can mute everyone except you and Finola. Is that okay?
Yes.
All right. So everyone's being muted.
Okay.
1 second. Hang on. Okay, Ursula, you have to unmute yourself. Finola's good.
Okay, I would like to welcome everyone to Researching Historical Romance. Okay, joining us today for a talk joining us today is Finola Austin, whose first novel, Bronte's Mistress, will be released on August 4th by Ateria Books. Bronte's Mistress explores the scandalous historical love affair between Branwell Bronte and Lydia Robinson, giving voice to the woman who allegedly corrupted her son's innocent tutor and brought down the entire Bronte family. Centered as it is on a love affair, the novel has strong romantic elements. Finola will be giving us an inside look into her research process, which should be especially, but though not exclusively, useful to members who write historicals. During the Q&A portion, she will be taking questions more broadly and is happy to speak about her journey to traditional publication. Find Finola online at www.finolaaustin.com or on social media, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. I will list her website in the chat, and Finola, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Ursula. I'm really happy to be here. I'm going to share my screen. So could the host enable screen sharing so that I can present some slides? While I wait for that, yes, as Ursula said, my first novel comes out on Tuesday. So you catch me, you know, in the chaos just before publication. I have my release event at the Strand, New York, obviously virtually, this Monday night, which I'm really looking forward to. Okay. Let me know if you're seeing what I'm seeing. Are we good?
Okay, yes, you're good.
Great. So as Ursula mentioned, I'm going to be focusing for the talk portion of this on researching because my novel is historical fiction with strong romantic elements. No happy endings here if you know anything about the Bronte family, but it does center on a love affair. However, I hope the presentation won't only be useful for those of you writing historicals, and there's some points in here that'll be useful for research no matter the time period that you're writing in. This is me. We just covered some of this information. Bronte's Mistress comes out next week. It is my debut novel, though it's not the first novel that I wrote. It's actually the second that I went out querying with. I didn't get an agent with the first, and I ended up shelving that project, and that's my trunk novel now, as people say. But with this novel, I started working on it back in the fall of 2016, and it publishes next week, which to people in the normal world seems like a very long time, but of course to all of you on the phone who know how publishing works, it's been a pretty swift journey, and I'm happy to talk about that in a little bit more detail. Because this is a pretty small call, I'm happy to take questions throughout. So as I'm talking, if you want clarification, me to repeat anything, then feel free to jump in. I'm very happy to clarify. So my novel Bronte's Mistress is based on a real story, which is why research was so pivotal to my process for this piece of historical fiction. And it really started with all of the people that you see on this slide. So on my left, these are the Bronte siblings. I'm sure many of you as romance readers and writers are very familiar with the Bronte siblings, the ones who survived to adulthood. Charlotte, Emily, and Anne went on to become three of the most celebrated novelists of the 19th century. Charlotte's Jane Eyre is her most famous, but she wrote a lot of other novels too. Emily's Wuthering Heights. Emily was her sole novel, but it remains a cult classic from Kate Bush's song to teenagers everywhere. And then Anne is the least well-known, but she wrote two extraordinary novels, Agnes Grey, which was highly autobiographical and dealt with this same incident that my novel did. And then The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, which really shocked by its subject matter. And in this picture, you'll see in the background, there's this shadowy figure, and that is their brother, Branwell Bronte. He was second in age after Charlotte. They were extremely close growing up, and they really did think he was going to be the genius of the family. They thought he was the one destined to be a great artist or a great writer. This is actually a self-portrait where he painted himself out, and it's only from restoration that they've been able to see this shadowy figure of Branwell in the background. But he died not having achieved what his sisters did at just age 31, an alcoholic and an opium addict. And the protagonist of my novel, Lydia Robinson, has very much been blamed for his demise. The woman on the right, I don't know if anybody on the call has any guesses of who this is or knows who this is. Shout it out if you can, or put it in the chat.
Elizabeth Gaskell?
It is indeed. So this is Victorian novelist Elizabeth Gaskell, most famous for writing North and South and Mary Barton, though other novels as well. Again, I'm sure romance readers here are pretty familiar with some of these. I personally love North and South as a kind of grittier Pride and Prejudice. But it was really reading Mrs. Gaskell's biography of Charlotte Bronte that started me on this journey to write Bronte's Mistress. So a little bit about me. I was born in England. I grew up in Northern Ireland, and then I went to the University of Oxford to study Latin and English literature, and then I did a master's in 19th century English literature. So I was super familiar with this period. I'd written papers on Charlotte Bronte as part of my master's degree, but I'd never actually read Mrs. Gaskell's famous biography of Charlotte, which was the very first Bronte biography in 1857. I started a career in advertising, though I kept up my love of reading and obviously writing. And I came here in 2014. And it was in 2016 that I decided to make my move to New York more long-term. And one of the things I did at that point was ship my books across the Atlantic. You can see some of them on the shelves behind me. It was a bit of an undertaking to ship a few hundred books across the sea. And of course, it was not inexpensive. So I made a deal to myself when I shipped the books across that I was going to read every book that I owned and had not yet read. And one of those was Mrs. Gaskell's biography of Charlotte. So I felt pretty familiar with the Brontes. I'd read all their work, I'd read other biographies, but reading the Gaskell biography around halfway through, I came across this story about Lydia Robinson, the woman that Branwell Bronte had had an affair with. Mrs. Gaskell doesn't name her, but she really paints her in quite vitriolic terms. It's a real character assassination. She calls her a wretched and profligate woman. She says she tempted Branwell into the deep disgrace of a deadly crime. And she says that in this case, the man really became the victim, which is such an interesting reversal when I think of those other Victorian novels where it's always the young virginal girl who's being seduced by the evil older man. And as soon as I came across this, I just thought somebody has to have written this novel from her point of view, right? The Brontes are so perennially popular, but this characterization of Lydia Robinson felt like such a gendered double standard. And I thought someone has got to have written this novel. So I put the bookmark back in the biography, I set it aside, and I started Googling, and I discovered that nobody had. And at the time, I'd been out querying with my previous project. I had some full manuscript requests still out, but it was like I was possessed by this idea, and I just knew I had to write it incredibly quickly, and I had this feeling that if I don't do it, somebody else will. So for the next year, I started researching, oh, and this is Lydia Robinson herself. So this is the woman behind it all. It's the only known picture of her. She was 43 to Branwell's 25. So for the next year, I researched solidly, and I'm going to go into some details of what that desk research looked like before writing the novel. But when I wrote it, I wrote it in under 6 months, which was very fast for me compared to how long it had taken me to do the previous novel. But I knew when writing about people as famous as the Brontes, you really need to do your research and get it right. So I had to go right back into my academic training to make sure I was discovering everything that had ever been written about this woman, Lydia Robinson, in order to tell her story in the book that I have today. So where did I start? I started with biographies. So this one, Dark Quartet, the best-selling story of the Bronte family, was the very first Bronte biography I read. I read this as a teenager. I'd already read Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights and the other novels, and this was the first place I really came across the story of these 4 siblings. And I was always fascinated by it, by the Yorkshire moors that they lived on the edge of, by the imaginative lives they had with each other. They created these play worlds, which they continued right into their 20s, called Angria and Gondel. And that's really when I fell in love with the Bronte myth. But of course, when I started researching Lydia Robinson, my focus had to be shifted a little bit to Branwell, the brother who she had the affair with, and then also to Anne Bronte, because Anne Bronte, the youngest Bronte sibling, was governess in the same house to Lydia's daughters. So this is just a snapshot. I love Daphne du Maurier, so I really enjoyed her biography of Branwell. And then, of course, I read the most academic and compendious Bronte biographies out there. Juliet Barker has done such a wonderful job of gathering all known materials about the Brontes' lives. So this is just some of the books I first started with. I read everything, and I used the index, and I looked for references to Lydia Robinson, to Thorpe Green Hall, and I really started tracking everything that was known about this affair. The other thing I did was look at academic articles. So this is JSTOR, which some of you may be familiar with. This is an amazing resource of which has digitized most academic journals from the last kind of 200 years. You need a login, and this is where I would say having a friend in academia is wonderful. So I have a friend who actually just finished her PhD at Columbia. She's a historian. And essentially during that year, around once a week, I would send her a list of articles and say, please download these for me. So I read every article that had ever been written about Lydia Robinson. And of course, lots of them contradict each other. This has been a very controversial topic among Bronte fanatics and academics for nearly 200 years. So there was a lot to dig into. But whenever I came across anything being referenced in the index of another book, being referenced by a blog post online, I would track it down to the source. And articles are really great because they get to the point much more quickly than a book. So you can kind of skim through them, see if they're useful, and if not, move on. The next thing I did was I really wanted to understand all the people in the story. So of course the Bronte siblings were the most famous, and I always knew that Lydia Robinson was going to be my protagonist. So I used Ancestry.com and other digitized census resources to understand the lives of not just them, but everyone around them in their lives. So their neighbors, and really importantly to me, their servants. I didn't want it just to be the rich and famous people who were real in my book. So every single character that's mentioned in my book, with the exception of one horse, is real. So the dogs are real, the servants are real, the neighbors are real, the reverend is real. And I knew much more about any of these people than ever made it into the final draft. But census records can be pretty limited. For example, if you look at the records for Fort Greene Hall, the house where Anne and Branwell worked and Lydia was mistress, it lists all the people who live there, but it doesn't list any of their jobs. So I can kind of guess who the servants are because they have different names, but it doesn't tell me.
I can't talk to you right now. I'm in a meeting.
If you're speaking, can you go on mute? Thank you. So yeah, I didn't know which servants were which. So I didn't know which one is the maid, which one's the footman, which one's the housekeeper, which one's the gardener. And of course, all of that is really important if you're going to turn this into a novel. And what you see on the right was an absolutely extraordinary resource, which is just a miracle that this exists. So in the neighborhood of the two villages near Lydia Robinson's house, known as Great Ousburn and Little Ousburn, there was a carpenter called George Whitehead. And he was literate, probably the first person in his family to be literate. And for 6 decades during the 19th century, he kept a journal. In fact, he kept 4 journals, and he called them births, deaths, marriages, and sundries. And every day he just wrote down what happened. So it's an absolutely incredible resource. He mainly talks about people of his class, so very much the working class people in the area. There are some references to like parties at the big house, rich people getting married, but many more references to my horse was lamed, someone hanged themselves in their barn, this child died of whooping cough, we brought the harvest in today. Absolutely incredible. And these journals had been published in 1990 by a local historian who raised money locally, worked with some women at the local church, and typed them up. And they self-published this amazing resource, which I was able from America to purchase on eBay and have delivered in Brooklyn, which is just the incredible resources that digitization has given us. So in this, there was an index of all the names. What I did was I looked at the last names of all the servants who I knew were connected to the house. And I cross-referenced all of those names in these journals to find any references to them or their family. And from this, I was able to find out who was the coachman, who was the gardener, who was the housekeeper. But not just that, I was able to find out how many children they had. Were they a widow or a widower? Who were their parents? Did they have elderly aunts and uncles or great aunts and uncles to look after? And so my depth of knowledge about the servants runs extremely deep. Not all of those details made it into the final draft, but it means that when a character says something in passing, like I've got 6 children to support, that's kind of come born out of that knowledge, and I think helps them feel more rounded as secondary characters. But this resource is obviously deeply improbable. Bronte scholars had looked at it before, but they just kind of flipped through it and said, oh, isn't it a shame that George Whitehead never mentioned the Brontes? And he doesn't, right? Like, he never mentions Branwell or Anne at all, but he definitely mentions people that Branwell and Anne would have known, from the clergy to the family that they worked for, to the neighbors they would have seen every week at church, and just allowed me to build up an amazing picture of what their lives would have been like there. So what did I do next? I had all these notes, I had so much information, and I was very frantic at the beginning, but I had to be systematic. So essentially what I ended up doing was building out a spreadsheet. This is just a screen grab of part of it. But you'll see the columns, this is what they are. The first column, column A, is the age that my main character, Lydia Robinson, was on a certain date. B is the date, C is the month, D is the year, E is the category. So I was looking at anything related to the Brontes, anything related to Lydia herself, anything related to her children, her husbands, her broader family. So I color coded like that. A brief description of the event. For instance, Charlotte and Emily go abroad to Madame Hager's pool, is there on row 91. And then on the far right, I tracked the location and the source. So this allowed me to look for inconsistency. So if I had two journal articles that said things happen on a different date, I would put them both in with a question mark, and I would look for conclusive evidence that one was correct or the other. You'll see that January 1843 is in yellow. And the reason for this is when I started kind of moving out of the research phase and into the writing phase and the outlining phase, I needed to decide where my novel should begin and end. Because I could have started with Lydia as a child, gone Lydia as a teenager with her first marriage. I could have started with Anne Bronte arriving at the house. I ultimately decided to start the novel in January 1843, which is when Branwell arrived at the house to be employed as tutor for the first time. So that is my inciting incident, is Branwell's arrival just after the deaths of Lydia's mother and nearly 2 years after the death of her youngest daughter. And if you scroll down later in the spreadsheet, you'll see where the novel ends. I didn't want to give you too much of a screen grab because I don't want to give spoilers for the way that the novel pans out. But this is really how I took all of my research to start forming my outline. And I know last month you had a great session by Ursula led on Scrivener. So what I then did was, once I knew where my novel would begin and end, between those two yellow cells, I started highlighting, well, which of these things has to be scenes? And I use those as the markers in Scrivener for these are the scenes you have to write. Some of these things are known events. This is just a screen grab again from the beginning of the novel because I don't want to give too much away. But for instance, it's a known fact that on the 13th of March, 1843, the Reverend Bronte visited the house and had dinner with the family. And so I always knew, well, this is my scene with the Reverend Bronte. And it essentially ended up being like a Mad Libs or a fill in the gap because between the known events, I made up scenes that we don't know whether they happened, or my fictionalizations. So for instance, it's true that Lydia arrived home on 10th of January or thereabouts from her mother's funeral, but whether she tried to have sex with Edmund a few days later, or whether the girls went visiting the poor on that Valentine's Day, or whether she had a particular conversation at breakfast about Reverend Bronte before he arrived, those are my inventions based on the known facts. So essentially this is how I went from a ton of notes to a spreadsheet to an outline, is kind of that progression from me typing up notes to me putting a spreadsheet to me moving across to Scrivener and using some of those functionalities that you ran across last time. The other thing I did was I created specific timelines for every character. So the spreadsheet is super overwhelming. It's also very focused on Lydia and the Brontes. So for every single character, and again, not all of these made it into the final draft, I had a character sheet within Scrivener where I listed every known date in their own lives. So I arranged them by household, as you can see on the left. When a house had a name like Great Bar Hall, I have that. When it's just the name of a family like Lascelles, I have Lascelles household. And then within each of these people, I can click on them, and some of them would just have a birth date and death date because they're not that important to me and not much is known about them. On the right, you can see an example of part of one of these. This is from the gardener. Again, I've cut it off just before the novel starts because I don't want to spoil anything. But you can see I have where he was born, who he married, his children being born. And at the top, I have his age range in the book. So I could quickly flick when I was writing and be like, wait, what age is Bob Pottage the gardener again by 1845? Oh, right, he's 35 years old. Got it. And when you're trying to keep track of such a huge cast of characters, this was very important. On this, when you're writing anything based on real people, there are a lot of them. People in real life know lots and lots and lots of people. So I did have to edit some people out. In one of the drafts of my novel, I had 8 people named William, which was confusing. So you had to kind of cut some of them out, maybe have one called Will or Bill, limit references to the ones that are not important, have someone be Uncle William, for instance, just to make it clear. Even with my main characters, I ran into this problem. So Lydia Robinson herself, her first daughter is also named Lydia Robinson. So in that case, I couldn't change it as well because you could think, oh, maybe use her middle name. Well, her middle name was Mary, and Mary was also one of her younger sister's names. So they were really not very inventive when it came to names. And if I was making up a book, I would give every character a different letter of the alphabet. But here that just wasn't possible. So one thing I did was my characters are sometimes confused. Like if someone says Lydia, they both turn around, and I kind of hang a flag on it. So by having the characters be confused, you can make it very clear for the readers in your follow-up without it looking like a mistake. Of course, at the same time, I was using Google a lot to find images of places, either places that no longer exist or people who are dead, but places that still exist. So here on the top left, this is where the Freemasons met in York. So Branwell Bronte, Lydia's husband, local doctor, they were all members of the Freemasons, and they met in one of these upstairs rooms above an inn. Not there anymore, but this is a late 19th century photo that I found of it. Equally, the Theatre Royal in Scarborough, the Robinsons holidayed in Scarborough every year. The Brontes frequently went with them. And this is very important, this theater, to the trajectory and the arc of the younger Lydia, who falls in love with an actor there. That is long gone, but this photo existed from before the theater was torn down, and I was able to find it online. One of those actors is who you see in the top right. He's a character who appears in an important scene of my novel, Harry Beverly, and actors often did have sketches made of them, especially in different roles, so these were incredible to find online. At the bottom, this is where Lydia's mother-in-law, the older Mrs. Robinson, lived. Again, has been demolished since then, but amazing what you can find online just by Googling. And at the top, this house still does exist. This is where Lydia's older sister and her brother-in-law lived. It takes place in part of my novel, it's actually there. I knew I wasn't going to be able to visit that specific location, and so I relied on images and videos online. And on the point of videos online, I actually discovered there's a whole subgenre of YouTube videos of people breaking and entering and trespassing into derelict old mansions in the UK. So this, you can only see a little bit here, is Great Bar Hall. It's where Lydia lived with her second husband. It's an absolutely amazing property near Birmingham. The shell still exists, but it really is very dangerous. But there are men who go in with video cameras, with GoPros on their head, and they just film what they see. And what an incredible resource for me to be sat here in Brooklyn, being able to look around, see what the windows look like, see what the stairways look like, even if obviously a lot of the decoration and interior has totally fallen away. So this was all my desk research for the first year. And I've mentioned some of these already, but just some pointers of what I'd suggest to do here. First, get an academic friend, someone who you can ask, please send me these articles. Do you have access to this book? Really, really great to have. Second, keep good notes. I was a little bit frantic at the start, so I had to have this moment of, okay, I've got to be methodical. I know I'm excited about this idea, but I need to approach this like it's a more academic project. And with that, track your sources, because once I did get the book published, it now ends on an extensive author's note at the end where I list how I know everything and what's true and what's not. And it was only because I'd made such good notes that I was able to say, wait, why did I make that choice? And how did I find this out? And so keeping scrupulous notes is so important. using libraries and talking to librarians. Librarians love kind of ferreting out information, and whether that's librarians locally in New York or emailing with ones if you're working on, say, somewhere in the UK like I was. And if it's somewhere where they don't usually offer this service, you can always politely offer to pay to get documents sent to you. A lot of the time they'll tell you it's totally fine. And they'll be like, no, I'm happy to do it. It's only a few pages. But just by showing Welling and being like, let me know if there's any fee associated, it just shows that you're taking their time seriously, and I think can really set you up for success. So that was the desk research portion. But of course I knew I wanted to do some research on the ground as well. And I actually made the decision that I was going to write a draft of the novel before I did my research trip. So I wrote a draft of the novel, as I said, pretty quickly between fall 2017 and spring 2018. And then that April, I took a trip to the UK. As I mentioned, I'm Irish and English, so I go back to the UK pretty regularly. So I combined this on a trip home to see my family near Belfast. But, you know, I had a layover of One Direction, went via Leeds. It was kind of bizarre, but did this in order to be able to go to the main points that I wanted to hit. So the first place I went was actually to the area of Great and Little Ousben, where Lydia Robinson lived, where Branwell and Anne lived. And in the village, this is the only marker that there's anything to do with the Brontes in the area. It's just this one poster on the wall. It was in a parking lot. There are spelling mistakes in it, like Folk Green Hall was not spelt that way. But it was nice to see that at least some people hike through the area and they see some reference to the Brontes, and local people knew about it. So when I started chatting to people and telling them while I was there, they'd all heard apocryphal stories about, oh yes, Branwell apparently slept with the lady of the manor, but there really wasn't much there compared to when you go to Haworth, where the Brontes were from, where there's a whole booming Bronte tourism industry. So I stayed in the only Airbnb in Great Ousben, which was an outbuilding at the post office. I can't drive, so I had to walk everywhere. So I took a series of local buses in order to get there. And I spent hours trudging across the Yorkshire countryside, which was amazing to understand what it might have been like to travel in the 19th century, right? Like in those novels and Agnes Grey, et cetera, they're always walking and it takes them an hour to get anywhere. So these villages are right beside each other. The house would probably be a 2-minute drive away from the village. And yet for me, this is like an hour or plus excursion. So first up, the house itself. So on the left, this is Folk Green Hall as it would have looked when Branwell and Anne lived there, and Lydia Robinson, from the front and then from the back. Unfortunately, it burned down in the late 19th century. It was replaced by a new hall, which is the image that you see on the right. And this is now a school. This is called Queen Ethelburga's Collegiate. It's been a school since I think the 1920s when the school moved out of York. And a really fascinating place. So of course, I emailed the school ahead of time to see if I could visit. When you're talking about a place with a lot of minors there, you have to kind of get that clearance in advance. You can't just turn up on the doorstep. But they were very proud that they had some link to the Brontes, and they allowed janitorial staff to show me around. So this main house on the right was honestly of little interest to me because it wouldn't have been there when Anne and Branwell and Lydia were. But of course, I was polite. I had the tour. It was interesting. It was, you know, a beautiful school, lovely private school in the heart of Yorkshire. And the grounds I was much more interested in because they might have been more similar to when Anne and Branwell lived there. What does still exist, though, is this house. You can see that the new hall, this image on the right, was actually modeled on this building on the left, which is a real Tudor building. It's known as the Monk's House or the Monk's Lodge. And this is the house where Branwell Bronte slept. It's now a private residence. It's absolutely beautiful. It's actually lived in by the owner of the school's son. So it does still have some connection to the school next door, but it is a private house. They did not invite me in, even though I chatted to them, but I got close enough to see some beautiful details. Like it's called the Monk's House, and below me down, there is a little statuette of a monk above the front door, which is of course just an amazing detail for a writer that I wouldn't have known from any of the images that exist online and I was able to describe in my novel. of course, it's kind of strange when you've been writing about a place for a while, like thinking about it and then writing about it, to suddenly be there. So there were things I had to change. For instance, I'd had Branwell climb out of the window. You can see these windows are far too tiny for anyone to climb out of. So from on the trip, I had to be like, well, I guess he's not romantically climbing out the window anymore. In fact, I have him bumping his head on it because it's too small and too narrow when he goes to straighten up and run down the stairs. So just those really beautiful details that you can come across. The other thing that happened at the school was they did let me into a storage closet. They said, well, we don't think there's anything Bronte related in here, but feel free to go through our old papers. Fascinating stuff. Photographs of schoolgirls and schoolboys from the 1920s, 1930s, lots of old school prospectuses and magazines. Of course, nothing to do with the Brontes. But my novel now starts with a fake newspaper clipping, which I'll show you here. They designed it really nicely to be a newspaper clipping, which imagines that a real manuscript by Lydia Robinson has been found in the school. So mystery Bronte manuscript discovered at school. And I have a janitor at Queen Ethelburger's be the one to find it. So he's going through the yellow papers and he finds something that says Bronte. And then he's like, oh, wow, this could be worth something. So this is the conceit that now starts my whole novel, which was definitely inspired by me getting covered in dust, already covered in mud from trekking through the Yorkshire countryside and being left alone for an hour in this storeroom where I got nothing but, you know, a lot of dust in my lungs. So it was really fun. And I felt like such a private investigator being there. Back in the village, one of the main characters in my novel is a man called Dr. John Crosby. He was the local doctor, and he's very important to Bronte fanatics on this because he appears to have acted as a go-between between Branwell and Lydia Robinson after Branwell was dismissed from the house. And so I wanted to know about him, but again, the census fails me because the census at the time didn't give people addresses. It just said, Dr. John Crosby, Great Ousbourne. No sign of which house, which number. There was just one street at that point. And so the very first day of my research trip, I was just in the post office because I was, you know, sleeping in the outbuilding, chatting to my host about why I was there. And I mentioned that one of the things I wanted to do was try and work out which house had been the doctor's in the 1840s. And blow me down, a woman around 80 years old was looking at greetings cards, you know, spinning around the display case, looking to buy a greeting card in the post office. And she says, oh, are you looking for the doctor's house? It's Rosehurst. And she points at this house down the street. I'm a little skeptical. So I say, are you sure? Like Dr. John Crosby from the 1840s? And she's like, yeah, that's his. So I had to go and knock on the door. Another elderly lady comes to the door. She definitely thinks I was trying to sell her something. But I garble out, did Dr. John Crosby live here in the 1840s? And she says, yes, his name's on the deed we got when we got the house. And so she invited me back for tea later that day. I had tea in the front parlor, which is the window that you can see here on the lower floor. It's now the setting for a scene in my novel, a really important scene. I hope she's not too shocked about what transpires there. But just so incredible that history was so close. And we think about the 1840s as a very long time ago. And yet just from asking around and knocking on doors, I got access to this information that Bronte academics hadn't got from poring over books, just from talking to real people. And of course, I work full time, I live in the US, I couldn't go on a super long trip. So I was only in the area of Great and Little Ousbourne for a matter of 3 days. If I'd had longer, I would have probably knocked on the door of every house in the village and asked anybody who was willing to speak to me whether they'd heard anything about the Brontes. And I'm sure a lot of what I would have heard would have been nonsense or stuff that I already knew, but maybe, just maybe, there would have been some more gems like this, which would have brought me to some new information that allowed me to understand my characters in more depth. I also went to the local churches. This is the Church of Holy Trinity in Little Ousbourne. This is the church where Anne Bronte and Branwell Bronte worshipped. Anne Bronte actually sketched this church, so Bronte fanatics know it from her sketch. There's an amazing mausoleum in here for the Thompson family, who were their neighbors and minor characters in my novel. Unfortunately, it's locked up, but I have found newspaper clippings from the 90s when they had a series of concerts in there and opened it up to the public. But a really beautiful place. And one thing I did with the churches is they're now both run by the same vicar, because they're around a 3-minute walk apart and congregations are smaller. I emailed the vicar ahead of time. The vicar was new to the area. She didn't know much about the Brontes at all. But I emailed her around a month before my trip, explained who I was and why I was coming. And I asked her if she could ask around in her congregation if she had any people who were interested in local history. And so the morning I went to the church, I met her and 6 of her parishioners who turned up with their own stories to tell me, their papers to show me. One of them was a cleaning lady who went and cleaned the house of the widow of the local historian who'd put together that Victorian Usborne volume of George Whitehead's diaries in the 90s. He was dead, but this cleaning lady was able to bring me a load of his papers, which I quickly photographed on my phone in order to read and decipher later because I was under such a time crunch. But just from that little bit of planning ahead, I came across some real gems. Of course, at the churches, there were also gravestones. This was very emotionally affecting for me because I knew my characters. I'd been researching them for a year, writing about them for 6 months. This is the tombstone of Edmund Robinson, Lydia's husband. And on the right, you can't make it out very clearly, but this is the plaque to her daughter, Georgiana, who was 2 when she died nearly 2 years before my novel begins, which is a loss that's really affected my main character. So it really brought it home for me. It had felt like an academic exercise until I was actually there and standing at real people's graves. It was an incredible feeling. This is at the other church, Great Usborne, 3 minutes walk away. This obelisk covered in ivy is the doctor's obelisk. So the reason that local people in the town still remember who the doctor was is because he has the biggest monument in their churchyard and this plaque inside. So his fame has been secured by the fact that that his friends and family came together to finance this obelisk and this huge plaque. And there is writing on the obelisk that's obscured now, but it's an absolutely wonderful encomium of what a great man he was, which is great information when you're writing a character. So I mentioned those parishioners. The most amazing thing that one of them brought me, and I can't believe this isn't in a museum. So you saw that mausoleum earlier, right, for the rich family over here on the right, the Thompsons. So these are the grand neighbors who Lydia and family went to their parties. They could have been the model for some of the rich neighbors in Agnes Grey. And one of them, Caroline Thompson, kept a commonplace book, which a lot of young women at the time did. They would get people to sign it, write poems, sketch. And here on the left, you see her sketch of the house of Kirby Hall, which is now lost to us. That's been reproduced in a couple of places. You see a fragment of her writing and her botany sketches on the right. You even in the middle see a signature from William Wilberforce. So really famous abolitionist and British politician. And this is just in somebody's house. And the man who owns this, John, told me, "We think there used to be 3 more volumes, but they've got lost somewhere." And of course, I was holding my breath as I flipped through because I was like, am I going to find a poem signed by Anne Bronte, right? I didn't, but I still came across some incredible details that I could put into my novel. And I believe it was very possible that if the other 3 editions or volumes of this commonplace book still existed, that there would be a fragment of Bronte writing in there. I did try and advise him that he should maybe think about giving it to a local museum, but I think he remained unconvinced. So that was great in Little Usborne. I then, of course, went to Haworth, where the Brontes lived. They were born in Thornton, but they all moved here when they were very young, and all of them except Anne are buried here. So on the left, you see the parsonage surrounded by gravestones, very famous image. I played at being a tourist for a bit. I was there with Emily, who's the academic friend I mentioned earlier. We tried on some bonnets. We did the typical tour. But of course, while I was there, I also did some archival research. So I emailed the Bronte Parsonage Museum ahead of time, told them about my project, and I got access to the so-called Robinson papers, which are all papers that exist referencing Lydia Robinson or Fort Green Hall. And there were some incredible things in here. So this, for instance, is an inventory of all the furniture in the house. So I was able to go back through, and in my novel, any item of furniture that's mentioned is real. So I knew what was made of mahogany. I knew the words they used for shovel tables. I knew they had painted chairs. I knew they had hearth rugs. So it was actually quite funny. I was out for dinner with my agent and editor. It was the first time we'd all been together in person. And my editor mentioned, you know, I was rereading it again, and do you feel like there's too much mahogany? And I laughed because I was like, well, actually, they just had a lot of mahogany. And I told her about this furniture inventory. So this was the kind of detail that I could speckle back into my completed manuscript. It didn't change a lot about what I'd written, but it brought a whole new level of kind of authenticity. Like even knowing that they would have called the mirror above the mantelpiece a chimney glass in here. It's just such a wonderful detail that makes it feel so much more Victorian. Of course, you could overdo this. I didn't want to stuff in references to every single piece of furniture. So I really looked for places that I'd already mentioned furniture and then just swapped out the names versus making every single scene feel like I was listing every piece of furniture in the room. The coolest thing is the 18 letters written by Lydia survive. They're not very interesting letters. They're to her business agent. She addresses them, you see on the left, my dear sir. So they're mostly just business letters. But how strange to be working on this for over 1.5 years, really putting yourself in this woman's mind and soul, and then be holding pieces of paper that she signed and that she wrote. One thing, there are letters throughout my novel. I use them as a device to move us through time. They were also, of course, very important in the 19th century as the primary form of communication. So one thing I did change is Lydia signs every letter, yours very truly. And so now in my novel, she signs every letter, yours very truly. So I took her sign off from these letters. You'll notice the black edge of the paper. That's because that's what they did when they were in mourning. So as well as wearing mourning dress, they had mourning stationery. So that when you got a letter with a black rim, you knew someone had died or someone had died within the last year. So just really amazing details. And I think with my Bookstagrammer mailing that's going out this week in time for the release, my publisher has actually put letters rimmed in black to be kind of props for people taking pretty posts for Instagram based on this detail that I gave them. The other thing, of course, I did at Haworth was see the Bronte's graves. So what's sad here is that Anne is missing because Anne is in Scarborough, where I didn't have time to go, even though it's an important location in my novel. But the rest of them are buried there. So it kind of brought it full circle for me, coming back to the groups of people who started it all. If I'd had more time, if I didn't have to work for my living, I would have gone to Scarborough, I would have gone to Graybar Hall, maybe I'd have even tried to break in myself or got an actual legitimate tour. I would have gone to Alstree Hall, which I had a photo of earlier. But I had to pick and choose which were the locations that were the most vital for me in order to bring my novel to life. And so some tips for if you're doing a research trip. Number one, just talk to people and tell them what you're doing. Like, I was a little embarrassed, I guess, initially. Like, I think when you tell people you're writing a book, there's always a danger they're going to roll their eyes and say, really? But I just learned to be brave about it, and I would tell people what I was doing. You also have to let go of the idea that if you tell people your idea, they're going to do it. Because at this point, I was 1.5 years in. I knew how much research this took, and I was pretty sure I was already ahead. So I didn't feel like if I mentioned it to someone, they'd be able to like write a book in a week that was going to rival mine. So I talked to everybody from when I was booking my Airbnb. I wrote the story of what I was doing in my booking request. If someone chatted to me on a bus, I would tell them what I was doing. If I bumped into a hiker on the moors, I would chat to them about what I was up to. And, you know, even if 1 or 2 people just give you a little gem, I think it's absolutely worth it. Next, plan ahead. So emailing the school, emailing the vicar, emailing the Bronte parsonage, everything was set up and ready to go for me. So that I wasn't scrambling when I was there. Or there'd be nothing worse than only having a 3-day research trip and then turning up at the museum or the archive you wanted to go to and finding out it was shut on Mondays. So you really need to be organized about this stuff, especially when time is at a premium. There's no harm in asking for anything. So even if the answer is no, then the answer is just no. Right? Like when I knocked on the door of the doctor's house, that lady could have told me to get lost and this was her private property. Instead, she gave me tea, biscuits, brought me into the garden, chatted to me for around 2 hours, showed me into her cellar. Yes, there were moments when I thought she could kill me. But she seemed like a lovely lady, and I was very grateful for the help. Thank the people who help you. I sent cards to everybody after. So anybody who I knew their address, like I'd been in their house or they worked at the school, I sent them straight there. For the parishioners who helped me at the church, I sent a load of those cards to the vicar and asked her to distribute them, because some people I only knew their first names, not their last names or exactly where they lived. And of course, I put them all in the acknowledgements. So I kept up to date with some of them. So especially the lady who lives in the doctor's house, she kept emailing me for months afterwards, asking me when the book was going to be out. And at the time I was like, well, I'm still doing beta readers. Well, I'm trying to get an agent. But eventually there was a day when I was able to email her and say, guess what? This book's going to be published. And now she's going around buying copies for all of her friends, wanting her local book club to do it because she feels like she's been part of it, and waiting for it for several years. I wish I'd built in more time for unexpected leads. So again, time is always tricky, especially if you have another full-time job. But for instance, that meeting with the parishioners was so good. I wish I could have spent a few more hours with them, but as it was, I had to catch a bus back to York to get a train to get to Haworth to meet my friend there at a specific time. There's a noise from somebody. I don't know if you're not on mute, can you mute? Obviously wear walking shoes. I walked everywhere. I still, you know, I track all my steps on my phone. If I go back to that month, it's like the most I've walked ever. Like I was absolutely exhausted, and I got very, very lucky with the weather. Yorkshire is notoriously wet. I was there in April. I was expecting to get drenched. It was glorious sunshine, but it meant I was hot. Like some days I was wearing jeans and I shouldn't have been, and the ground was still muddy underfoot, even though it was hot. So I actually had to put my sneakers in the washing machine at the Airbnb. Everything survived, it was fine. But I didn't have that many clothes with me because I was packing light. And yes, I wish I had been, you know, packed for every eventuality weather-wise, because I just kind of presumed it would be horrid. Don't get dehydrated, especially you're talking to people, you're running around all the time. And then keep the receipts for tax purposes. So I didn't do this the first time, but I have done a research trip since on my next novel, which I've just sent to my agent. And for that, I was much more aware of all of the things that can be written off. Obviously, I'm not an accountant, so don't take my word for it. And I try not to be too crazy. For instance, my last research trip, I was in Paris. So I put my train tickets from London and my hotel, but I didn't try to like say that all the fancy meals I had in Paris or eating cake in a bakery was really vital to my research, because it wasn't, but I did need to be there. So I'm gonna open it up to any questions. I know this was very research focused, but again, I'm happy to answer about anything. I know that a lot of you may have questions about getting an agent or the book deal or anything else, and we're a pretty small and intimate group, so I'm happy to chat about whatever. I'm gonna make sure we can see each other's faces. Over to you.
Hi, hang on. Participants can unmute themselves.
I'll be happy to jump in. This is so fascinating. I'm a total Bronte fan, and I read Dark Quartet and The Infernal Worlds of Branwell Bronte when I was a teenager too. So I'd forgotten about those stories. So that was wonderful. So this is really fascinating. I can't wait to read your book. I did have just a question. The portrait that Branwell paints of the four of them that where he painted himself out. When did he do that in relation to your story? Like, is that something that happens before or after?
Yeah, I think it's before. I don't have the exact year to mind, but I think it's probably pretty shortly before, just because of thinking when they were all back home. But I could double check, but yeah, I'm pretty sure it's before, because by the time he returns to Haworth after this affair, he really has gone off the deep end, right? Like Mrs. Gaskell wasn't wrong about that. Like his alcoholism is in full swing. He's a drug addict. He's at the Black Bull all the time. He really isn't ever productive ever again. One thing he is doing is writing poetry. All the poems in my novel are real, which when my writers groups and beta readers were giving me feedback, they were kind of tentative about the poems. They were like, you didn't write these, right? And I was like, oh God, no, they're terrible. And they're like, oh, thank God, we thought you'd written these really, really awful self-indulgent poems. But the poems are something that throughout my book are real.
And, Maria, I just had, so you're saying your journey to finding an agent, like how did that come about? How involved was it? Yeah.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, this was not the first book I'd queried with. So my first book was also historical fiction, but not about real people, just totally made up with a historical setting. That took me years because it was a book I kind of wrote on and off. I wasn't that serious about it. And then I was like probably 4.5, 5 years, but very, very sporadic. So I started trying to get an agent for that. And that's when I learned all the agent stuff. Like, what does a query letter look like? And what is a partial? And what's a full? And what is Query Shark? And what is manuscript wish list? So I learned like the basics that first time around. I got some requests. I even got some full requests. I got some lovely feedback, but it was one of those things where every answer over 6 months came back a no. And it wasn't even like a no, like, but if you change this, it was like, I like it, but I didn't love it. Or I like it, but I think it's going to be hard to sell, which I think now is very fair because I wasn't reading enough historical fiction that was being published now. I had just come out of the back of this master's degree in 19th century literature, so I very much knew the period and the history was right, but I didn't know what modern readers' tastes were when it came to historical fiction. And some of the critiques I got was, this sounds so like a Victorian novel that could be one. Whereas I think by the time I wrote Bronte's Mistress, it's like, it's a Victorian setting, but it's very much like a historical novel for now. And it's written in the first person and it's, you know, it has sex scenes. And I think it's not something that could have been written in the 19th century. So by the time I came to query Bronte's Mistress, I had a short list of agents. Some of them were agents I'd queried before. Some were some I found since. I did go to the Writer's Digest conference and do live pitching there. I got requests from all of those, but none of them came to anything. And my agent is Danielle Egan Miller. She runs Brown and Miller Literary Associates in Chicago, which is Chicago's #1 literary agency. And I had queried her the first time. I'd never spoken to her directly, but I got a partial request from her previous assistant. And it stood out to me because they gave me very good feedback and they were also just extremely polite. So they always acknowledged receipt, they always thanked, they always gave you a time frame. So when they had given me the partial request, they said, you should expect to hear in this many weeks. If you don't hear by then, you can nudge us. And anybody who's been through the querying trenches knows how like horrible it is. So that had really stood out to me. The other thing that stood out to me about Danielle is that our reading tastes were very similar. So on her biography on her website, she lists like all the novels she loves. I think she mentions the Brontes and Daphne du Maurier and a load of others, and everything that she listed that I'd read, I loved. And then the things she listed I hadn't read, I was like, well, I need to read that because this woman's got great taste. So I felt really good about her. And so I queried in August, and I thought I'd done everything. Like I was so organized with spreadsheets and checking everyone's rules because, you know, everyone says like, I just want the query, or I want 3 chapters, I want attachment, or I want no attachment. And blow me down, I queried her. She was in my first batch that I did that summer. And I got an immediate bounce back and I was so embarrassed because it said, actually, we're closed to queries for August. And it hadn't said that on their website, but it had said it on Twitter and I had just missed it. So I was mortified. I was like, well, I guess I'll try in September, but what a terrible like first impression. And then around an hour later, I got a reply and Danielle said, I wasn't meant to be looking at queries, but who could resist? Like the story of the woman who seduced Branwell Bronte, please send me the full right now. So it was extremely positive and it was also directly from her. And I knew from the first time that usually she does everything through her assistant. And she's told me since that she was just idly like looking through the queries, but I was the only person she responded to because they were shut. And she was like, oh, well, just this one. So I tried not to get too excited, but obviously I was excited because that's very positive. Sent over the full, didn't hear anything for a month, but then they were meant to be closed for queries. And at some point in September, her assistant emailed me and said, we want you to know that it's had one very positive read here, but we're still collating our thoughts. We're still interested. Please let us know if you have other authors. So at the same time, I was getting other partial requests and other full requests and of course other rejections, but that was really great to know. And this is just how communicative they are. I now understand how they work as an agency. Danielle is the only agent, but they have very much a team mentality. So they have a foreign rights agent, they have the assistant, they usually have an intern. And then Danielle's husband works on the finance side as well. So they all read everything if they're serious about offering someone representation. And so probably at that point, the assistant had read it or the intern had read it or both of them, and they loved it, but Danielle had yet to read it. And so then in October, there was a day I was at the Met by myself. I was meant to be seeing an exhibition. And I got an email from Danielle and I had to walk straight out. I never saw the exhibition. And she just started asking me those kind of detailed questions that I knew were often precursors to an offer. So she asked me, have you ever had an agent before? Have you ever been on submission to a publisher? Would you be open to editorial changes? Like all of the normal questions. And at that point, that's when my hopes were like very up, because I was like, well, this could still be a revise or resubmit, right? Like I've been burned before. I've had, I thought it was the one and then not. But it just felt so right. And I had such an energy burst that I ended up walking like the whole length of Manhattan, essentially, to where I was going next, and just like buzzing. And I didn't know really many people who would understand. Like I could tell my, then partner or my parents, but they weren't gonna like get what this meant. So I guess a few days after that, she said she'd like to have a call. On the call, I was at work, so I had to schedule a meeting, and I blocked a meeting room for an hour, but we spoke for 2 hours. So I got chucked out of my meeting room. I ended up missing my next meeting, and I ended up talking to her on the stairwell. And like everything else, my job, everything was like, well, I'll deal with it later. And there was construction going on in the stairwell and everything, but we just talked about the book. And we talked a lot about her editorial thoughts. And I was very open to editorial changes. I had 2 writers groups. I still have 2 writers groups, and I had beta readers too. But I really wanted that expert who was going to help me get it to the next level and who understood the market. And she was such an expert. So she told me everything she loved about the book. And it was the first time a total stranger had told me that they loved things about the book, which was very overwhelming. And then she talked about the stuff that could be stronger, the stuff she'd love me to pull out more, some of the big structural things, like back to that slide where I showed you my outline. I didn't have traditional chapters. I had the date stamp on every scene. And I explained to her that was like how I'd written the novel and the depth of the research and all of this. And she was like, that's great, but we should maybe put it into chapters. Like maybe you don't need to show all your workings. So those were the kind of broad notes. But by the end of the call, she said she wanted to make me an offer. And every part of me wanted to say yes then and there, but I did still have 2 full requests out with rubber agents. So I said the typical thing about, oh, I'm so pleased and flattered, but let me tell the other people who are reading. I actually knew that she was my #1 pick anyway. So a few days after that, I withdrew from the other agents, and I told Danielle that I was all in. So then I signed with her that October 2018. And then we did 2 rounds of edits together. One super broad strokes with just those big notes, like put it into chapters, add more Bronte references for fun, up the Gothic stuff. So there's like playing around with Gothic tropes, like ladies running around in their nightgowns and storms and all of that, ghost references. So I upped some of the Gothic stuff. So that was the first round. The second round was a much heavier edit where she went through and redlined, or more accurately, she does it on paper, and her poor assistant has to then go through and do the track changes in the document. We also changed all the spelling from British to American. Because I am British, I'd written it in British English because it made sense to me because it was set in Britain. But apparently, no, it needs to be in American. So I Americanized everything, which wasn't just a spelling punctuation. There were some word choices that had to end to or change to. So then we went on submission the last few days of March 2019. We sold it in 5 days, which I was not expecting. I thought it was going to take months. So we took a preemptive offer. So we had like that day to decide. It was all very dramatic. So that was April 2019, and then it comes out in a few days. So August 2020.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yay. Thank you.
An amazing journey.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Any more questions?
Finola, it's very refreshing to hear someone get excited about a research trip.
Yes, it was the most fun. And I will say,
I thought I was the only one who got excited about going to old buildings. Before I go on vacation, the first thing I do is check to see if there are any living museums, any houses that I can go and explore, and I just love it.
yeah, and it makes you feel like you're on a secret mission. if it's something you've been working on for a while. So I agree with you that it's nice just to go up to a place where you don't have preconceptions and then just go in and be inspired. That's like one type of cool. But another type of cool is when you've been researching something and obsessing over it and studying maps of it, and then you're actually there. So my new project, I mentioned I was in Paris, and everybody else is excited by like the typical Parisian landmarks. I was excited by, I know which guy lived in this building in 1792 and nobody else knows who he is, but I know who he is. The other thing I would say is that either go alone or be really careful about who you're with. I've read before that you remember trips better when you're alone because you're more on high alert. Like, especially if you're somewhere far and you may be thinking about your safety, or like it's a place not everyone speaks English. So you're just kind of alert, but that makes you alert to picking up the details, which is so good as a writer. Whereas when you go on a trip with other people, you typically remember how your relationship with them changed. So the conversations you had, the experiences you had together. So when I'm in the thick of research, it's probably better to be alone because I just picked up little details like about how the sky looked reflected in the puddles when I was walking around in Yorkshire and stuff I wouldn't have noticed if I'd been with another human. So I was totally alone for the Great Little Usborne bit. In Haworth, I was joined by my friend who is an academic, but she was a great person to be there with because she understands. Like when I said, I'm going to go to an archive for 5 hours now, she was like, great, I'll do some of my reading, or I'll go on a walk here and I'll see you later. So that was really fun because I had someone to have dinner with in the evenings, which was like less fun in the Usborne area. But someone who was like understanding versus if you went with someone who was your partner or friend and they thought it was going to be a vacation. And then you're like, oh, wait, let me stare at this doorway for another 20 minutes. Yeah, you need to have a very particular sort of relationship to get away with that. Any more questions about anything? Also happy to talk about like since getting the deal or anything, because I knew nothing about that at all.
So Finola, do you have, so what are your marketing plans? So the book is coming out now. So do you have like blog tours you're doing, signings you're doing? You know, did you do these yourself or did the publisher help? Did the agent help? What's all that? What's happening?
Yes, so a lot is happening. Obviously, we did not expect this to be in the midst of a global pandemic, so I've had to kind of get around that mentally. I'm excited that the book is still, you know, coming out. At one point, they were thinking about pushing it to spring 2021. The reason for that was less of the fun, like tour stuff, and more that at one point so many bookstores were closed that they were worried about distribution, but enough bookstores are open or open enough that we held the date, which I think is probably good overall because I've gone insane if it took longer. And also I think spring 2021 is going to be very crowded and who knows if it's even going to be better than now anyway. So on balance, I think it's good. So what I have coming up, virtual tour stuff. So I mentioned on Monday night, I have my book launch event with the Strand, New York. I can send that link in a few minutes so everyone can see that too. I'd love to see some of you there. So that'll be Zoom and Facebook Live. That'll be more focused on talking about the book itself versus the research. Today, I wanted to make this for like an expert writer audience, whereas that I imagine more of the questions will be about the Brontes or like how long did it take you to write or getting inspiration or the kind of general reader questions that people ask. I'm going to be in conversation with the American representative of Bronte Society. So that's really cool because she knows a lot about the Brontes as well. So she's kind of my ideal reader. I have some other events coming up later in the month. I'm doing an event with Wellington Square Bookshop also in PA, also remotely, where I'm in conversation with Natalie Jenna, who's the Jane Austen Society just came out. So we're doing a Jane Austen versus the Brontes event. So we're going to debate which is the best. I get like free the price of one, but the Jane Austen fans are mad. So if anyone's Team Bronte, please come and hang out with us. So we've been promoting that to JASNA and Jane Austen Society of North America and everyone. And I'm doing an event with the Historical Novel Society in New York. So Ursula knows about that one too. Later in the month on the 25th, which is in partnership with Shakespeare & Co. So that's also going to be more like research focused because of the nature of that audience. I'm doing historical fiction happy hour with Carrie Callahan and two other historical novelists. on the 28th. I tuned into their July one. That's really fun. It's people sharing fun facts about history, some games, potentially drinking games, but that's on Crowdcast, which I don't know if any of you have used before, but it's kind of like Zoom, but a bit more interactive for a webinar format. So I'm kind of excited about that. And then I'm also going to be in conversation with Martha Waters, who's To Have and to Hoax, came out from Atria, my publisher, a few months ago. Hers is like a Regency rom-com. It looks really fun. Actually, I'll grab it for you. My copy arrived yesterday. Yeah, so I don't know if anyone, this is more directly romance because this is rom-com, To Have and to Hoax. So this is next on my to be read list because I'm going to be chatting to her about all things 19th century. So that's like virtual events. I have some more. There's another Facebook Live. There's another Instagram Live. There's a lot. It's all on my website. And then I'm doing a blog tour, which kicks off on Monday. So that's 25 different stops. That was organized by Laurel Ann Natras of Austen Prose, so another Jane Austen kind of focused person. That's a mixture of reviews, excerpts, and then interviews with or guest blog posts from me. So I had to tailor those guest blog posts. Oh, Candice, you said you read To Have and to Hoax. Oh, I'm really looking forward to it. It looks like it's going to be fun. Yes, so in terms of who's done what, and then right after this call, actually, I'm doing an interview on BBC Radio Ulster. So that's cool because I was going to go to in September to the UK to do publicity where I'm from. And obviously the book is set in the UK and I'm from the UK. I really wanted to go, but I can't leave the country right now because of COVID, because I'm not a citizen or a green card holder yet. So if I leave, I can't come back. So I'm stuck. So yes, there's stuff going on. So in terms of who's done what, it's been a real mix. Number one, your agent really doesn't do much because your agent their main role is to sell the book. So she's been really helpful on things, anything we need to push back on the publisher for. So it took us a few goes to get the cover that we like, though I love the cover now, but it was a journey. The agent was great in advocating for what I wanted on the cover, or advocating for, oh, can you make some graphics to go with this virtual tour, or that kind of stuff. When she's pushing on them to be more helpful, she's the person. But I think there's a misconception. A literary agent is not like a talent agent. So they don't do like your actual event booking or PR. So then at Atria, I have marketing and publicity support, and they've been great. So a lot of the hits we've got have been due to them or partly due to them. Like I made a Pop Sugar list yesterday. They got me on a podcast. You know, they got me some of the bookstore events like the Strand, etc. But I have also done a lot. In the UK, because I had been planning this trip in September, I have some support from the Atria UK team, but not so much as in the US. So I actually hired an outside publicist to help me on the British stuff. And her remit was meant to be get me events for this 2 weeks in the UK. Of course, then what happened is the pandemic hit, so she had to pivot. So there's now a little bit of overlap because I guess some of the British media is being done by my publicist and some's being done by Atria. And then a lot I just did myself. My day job, I worked for Facebook and Instagram. I have a marketing and PR background. So I knew what to do, and I've hustled very, very, very hard. So even just the personal essays, I think at this point I've written around 20, and they all have to have a different angle. You know, just chatting to people and getting events, like chatting to Ursula to be here today with you. I've worked so hard. I've got on 8 different podcasts, 7 of those I got myself. So even if you have a big publisher behind you, and they are support, like I'm delighted with how Atria is done on this book. But at the same time, they have lots of books for the year. I just have one book. And this is, you know, I'm only gonna ever have one debut novel. And so I had to really, really, really work hard. And I will continue to do that throughout August. So I actually don't know what these few months would have looked like without the pandemic, because there's been a little bit of a silver lining for me in that I have been able to kind of just focus on this. And even though I have a day job, I've been able to be pretty flexible. So take calls during the day when I have to do them, especially with the British stuff. Like it's an evening show in the UK, but that means afternoon, which is why we had to move the time of the meeting today. So thank you for moving that for me. My job is very understanding as long as I get the work done. So I've had to do things like for this hour, I'm recording a podcast. Please don't hassle me, but I'll work late into the night tonight. But I think I will probably hit collapse at some point in September. So it's like the final push now to get August out of the way.
Are you totally focusing on the promotion at this point? And I mean, I don't know how you're doing a day job and all this promotion and writing another novel.
Yeah, so I sent a draft of my next novel to my agent in early July. And it wasn't like it was perfect because there's stuff I know I want to change, but it was partly just to get it off my lap because I felt like I was working 3 jobs with my Facebook job and the promotion and writing a new book. So just sending the new book across to the agent, getting it out the way. So she's meant to be reading it now. I bet even if she's read it, she's not going to tell me for another month because she's not going to want to distract me from promoting Bronte's Mistress. And I think that's very fair. Part of your agent's job is to manage you and manage your emotions. And I don't know if I need a big editorial letter like 2 days after publication, right? So I think she's going to pick her moment. So ideally, as things start to get a little quieter on Bronte's Mistress in maybe late September, I'll get notes back from her on that book. And that will be my focus again. It is very hard. When I was doing both, so writing that book, but also doing publicity efforts for Bronte's Mistress, it was very hard because my brain was so much on Paris and on the new book, but I had to be writing about Yorkshire and the Brontes. And it's been very helpful for me to set that aside since July to like reread the book, go back through my research notes, give talks like this has allowed me to come back and like, because part of the problem with writing is that when I think about the ideal time to interview me, it was in 2018. So it's 2 years later. Like in 2018, I knew everything. And now I have to be like, let me check my notes about when that portrait was, because I have it all somewhere. But of course, you know, you especially in events, you can't be like, give me 15 minutes to go back and find it in this particular place. But yeah, I think that's a really interesting thing about the delay that happens, is I used to fantasize about being interviewed when I was in it. And now I'm being interviewed and I have to dredge up all those memories. Anyone else?
Finola, Michael posted in the chat, you have your hard efforts in the research for the novel is absolutely amazing. Based on your experience, have you considered also writing as a biographical author?
No, I'm a novelist. I like making it up. So one thing I should have mentioned and didn't is when I was doing the research phase, especially the desk research, I actually partnered with my mother a bit. So my mother is like a big family tree person. She's like tracked our family trees way back. She's also disabled, so she can't travel here, and now I can't go there. But that kind of historical research is one thing she can do. She has a master's in history, whereas my master's is in literature. And what was so funny is I would send her when I got stuck. So when I was like, well, I can't find out if this person was married or this person disappears after 1850, can you help me find them? I would send her my tricky to solve problems and she would have another go at it. And she's very upset when she can't find something out. So she'd come back and be like, I'm really sorry. I've searched high and low and everywhere and I can't find it out. And my response is brilliant. If we can't find it out, I can make it up. So I'm really excited by the gaps that history leaves because that's where my imagination can take flight. Whereas I think a historian or a biographer, like I know biographers start doing some conjecture, right? And they're like, I think they were like this, or this might be what's going on. But essentially they have to be just true to the facts. Whereas I like these little gaps that history leaves us and how I can create in those. And also I love writing in the first person. I really do. The first novel I wrote was mainly third person with some first person insert narratives. And it's in the first person that I really come alive as a writer. Like I love a super close point of view. I love imagining being in somebody else's brain. I think that's probably going to continue. I'm very different from my main character, which, you know, I'd hope that people would know, like at a surface level and also in terms of personality. But it was so funny, even with one of my writers groups, when I started submitting the new book to them, they were like, but this character is so different from Lydia. I'm like, well, I know, because neither of them is me. But I love that, getting inside someone else's shoes or inside someone else's head and walking around in it. And I think that's truly unique to being a novelist. And that's what it excites me, because we're so trapped in our own brains, but fiction is a way that we can enter someone else's brain for a while. Any more for any more?
Been really wonderful. Thank you so much. Really
No,
looking
thank
forward
you
to
for having
reading.
me. I'm gonna in the chat right now put the launch event information. I promise it won't just be a repeat of today, though some of the stuff may be repeated. But I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope that some of you can come along. I guess one of the good things about the current terrible situation, oh, sorry, I think I just sent that to Barbara privately. Let me try again. Is that people can come to events more easily. So even if they're not in New York, or even if they just want to be home in pajamas.
Finola, are you a member of our chapter?
I'm not. So my book, yes, I was going to think about it, because right now I'm in Historical Novel Society and Authors Guild and Historical Writers Association. You know, like I mean, I love romance too. This is not, as I said, like a clear romance, because it's not happily ever after, and it definitely like is more historical fiction. But everything I write has very strong romantic elements, and I'm kind of very interested in tapping into that readership as well. So yeah, I'll definitely consider it. It was super fun to come along to your last meeting and to, you know, camp out today and pretend to be a member.
Are there any more questions?
Thanks so much, Finola. The presentation was really well organized and really, really, really very interesting. I write historical romance myself, sort of set in the, you know, late 1900 or late 1800s in, you know, the Pacific Northwest of America, and I'm nowhere near as organized as you are. And but I too, you know, like enjoy going to the place and taking the photographs and, you know, sort of trying to figure out where in the history of the town things have happened. And so it was really, really, it was really, really delightful to see all of your work, all of your hard work put together so, you know, cohesively and in your presentation. So thanks so much.
Thank you. It's so nice to find people who appreciate that, because I never know like how much detail is too much detail. Kind of like when someone who's not a writer says like, how long did it take you to write? I kind of have to pause and be like, do you just want me to say a certain number of months or years? Or do you like actually want me to talk you through the process? Because I don't want to see your eyes glazing over when I'm like, and then there were the beta readers, and then, but you get it. When people write, they understand. And yeah, hopefully understand the thrill for me of like seeing these graves, seeing these houses. Like, I know that I must have looked at like a crazy person, and yeah, I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't so far been quite as brave as you in terms of like going up to the librarians and sort of asking or knocking on doors and things like that. So kudos for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly easier to hide digitally, so you can work up to it. So sending an email is much less stressful than, I was very nervous when I knocked on that woman's door. I knew that she thought I was trying to sell her something. Especially when someone's older and they're just like nervous about callers and like, you know, the doors only open a crack, and I'm like, and I also aware that it's probably easier for me because I don't seem like a threat to people, because I'm a woman and because I'm white and young. Like, people are like, oh, you look safe. And it's probably really harder for some folks who might read as like more of a danger to people. So yeah, no one was concerned that letting me into the house meant that I was going to murder them. It was more likely to be the other way around.
Anna, one of the suggestions is if you go to, like I said, I like going to living museums. I went to, can't remember the name, but it was created by Ford in Detroit, Michigan. And I spent an entire day there. I walked into a house, the person was in period costume, and I was just kind of intimidated about talking to her, but I said, just say hi and that you write historical fiction. And she just jumped on the opportunity, and she gave me stories about the house and about the time period. It's very intimidating, but you just have to take that deep breath and say, I'm going to do it. Because like Finola said, the worst they can say is no.
True. True.
Yeah, and they may think you're mad, but you're never going to see them again.
Yeah.
So
True.
I think two things I'd like to maybe write something eventually based in New York so that I have access to research at my fingertips all the time. And then I'd also love to do something which is like a retreat situation where I spend more time in a place because I've always had to do it so quickly.
Yeah, and so I too want to set my next historical romance in New York so that I don't have to travel across the country to Port Townsend, Washington, which is where my first and now second book are set. But yeah, that's what I did. I would do like a writing retreat there, and so I'd be there for like 5 or 6 days and be able to like, you know, sort of just kind of get some of the writing done while being immersed in the, you know, town's Victorian atmosphere.
Yeah, no, because I was very organized, but that meant I didn't just have enough time to like relax and soak it in. That's what I missed, just the atmosphere of just like existing in a place. It was always like, right, now walk 5 miles to there, right? Like I was on a military operation. Like if you miss this bus, there's no bus for another 3 hours, so you better get moving. And I obviously need to learn to drive. That would be very helpful.
Yes.
And New York has such a rich history and a lot of historical houses that you can visit. And don't discount the cemeteries. I actually went to the cemetery looking for my grandparents' graves and I couldn't find it. I'm heading out the cemetery and the caregiver, he saw me and he's like, oh, could I help you? And I told him that I was looking for my grandparents' grave. I couldn't find it. He said, oh, hop in. So yeah, I'm one of those crazy people who will hop into a car with a strange man. And I hopped in. He drove me over to the grave. But while we were there, I learned that Bojangle Robinson, great tap dancer, is my grandparents' neighbor in the cemetery.
Oh my God.
Oh. Plus, he also then took me on a tour of the cemetery and gave me the history of the cemetery, the famous people living there, the scandals that happened back in the 1800s, plus information about the neighborhood. So,
yeah, Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn has been my favorite place to go during lockdown. It's still deserted. It's as massive as Prospect Park. It's filled with absolutely fascinating graves. And yes, equally, I've had to jump into a park ranger's car there once when I got locked in. And they were like, well, we got to get you out. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm trusting this park guy. But just what an amazing place to go. And there's so much inspiration there. And I see they've just announced an artist in residence program. I would love them to do a writer in residence program at Greenwood Cemetery because it's the most inspiring place, I think, in the city. It's wonderful.
Yeah, agreed.
One last thing, I did at the very beginning take a quick screenshot of everyone. Do you mind if I post on social media that I was here?
No.
Check before I don't want to take anyone's photo and then I'll.
All right, them too, and I'll put them on our Facebook.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no more
Perhaps should have worn more clothes.
If there's no more questions, we can let Finola go so she can take a second to take a deep breath before her interview.
I know. I need to start sounding more Northern Irish because my accent, they all think I sound American now. So I'm going to have to do the breaths and tap into that again. But thank you so much for having me. And it was so lovely to meet you all last time and tonight.
Thank you for agreeing to speak to us. This was so much fun.
Thank you all.
Take care.
Goodbye, everybody. Take care.
Okay, goodbye, everyone. We'll see you in September.
August 19th.
Great program.
Oh, sorry. Yes, August 19th.
Yep.
August
All
19th.
right.
August 19th, 6 o'clock for our Q&A with Wild Rose Press.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.